We are here with Raul and James talking about the Quinta's ghost. Thank you guys for having me.
Oh, of course. Also, you pronounced the Quinta perfectly.
Yeah. Yay! So this film follows a small piece of Francisco de Goya's life after he decides to retire. What inspired you to tell this story with a horror spin?
Well, I really wanted to tell a horror story in animation. That sort of was the first thing that was determined to do. And Goya had been, a character in Spanish history that I had been really interested in for a long time. And eventually I started thinking about the idea of making like a Gothic story, very much inspired by Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, but as a kind of like a man facing mortality and that sort of stuff, and just using Goya as the sort of the proxy to tell that story.
Yeah.
And then as we developed the story, this idea came about of what if we sort of take a little bit of a twist, and instead of having the classic story of someone arriving to a house that is haunted and then dealing with whatever ghosts are in there, the house is perfectly fine, and it is the guest that comes into the house that is haunted by this ghost, and it is from the point of view of the house that we try to understand what's happening with this person and who they are. And then because Goya had such a rich life, we had all this beautiful imagery that we could use to try to explain his life and everything that he went through. And because he lived through such an interesting and specific period of time in Spanish history, it allowed us to talk about, the monarchy, the invasion of France, all these different elements that made the movie very rich. So all of those things came together almost like a domino effect, and then it sort of became, once we sort of had everything lined up, it became a very clear, being like, I know exactly what we got to do.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that's very interesting. And I was just about to ask you about the perspective of the house too, because she said something along the lines of, you make me feel like a palace, even though like I'm an old country house.
Yeah.
And it kind of felt a little bit like she was sucking these beautiful pieces out of him, or maybe that's what he was like reflecting back to her, because like the whole movie is about a reflection. But then she says, that night you taught me a lesson that every creation has a price.
Yeah.
What did she mean by that?
Wow. So such a specific question. I think it's because the relationship, sort of the idea with the relationship between the house and Goya was to track it almost like a love story, right? And so in the way that I was trying to explain also to Maribel, the actress that did the voice beautifully, was, okay, imagine that you've gone through a toxic relationship with an ex, and some time has passed, and now you're able to write a letter to that person, having already understood that, gone through all the trauma, sort of like dealing and processing all everything that went on. So you're now in a place of like having found yourself again, and you can see it with a bit of more clear eye. And so the idea was, at the beginning, there's an element almost like, and we try to reflect it with the camera perspective as well, where the Goya is very small within the bigger space, because the house is not, that doesn't want to get close to Goya, so to speak. And then as she starts realizing that this is a nobleman that is bringing all these beautiful things to the house, and she feels very comfortable, there's that moment of like, sort of, what's the word? Not loving might not be the right word, but at least like
the honeymoon phase.
The honeymoon phase. That's what I say exactly, and that's where she's really like smitten by him, and this idea that like, I was this humble country house, and you are trying to make me look like a palace. And this is historical because Goya was very used to decorating the noble people's houses, and he would paint these type of paintings in their houses, and he wanted to do the same with his house. So this idea that, he would live in that small place, but still trying to sort of mimic this sort of much more elevated way of life. And then it's understanding that like this type of person, this someone of such magnitude and magnetism, does not come without a price. This idea of like being treated like this, being with this person, doesn't come for free. And so that he can only be who he is because he's gone through all of this stuff. And this idea of like the moment he faints and he says that phrase, is that idea of, okay, and now I've seen all the good things. Sorry. Should I? What did I do?
You've seen all the good
We're being attacked. We've seen all the bright side of the relationship, and now we're going to see sort of what the payoff of that is, right? And it's that idea that again, nobody can make art that is meaningful without having to suffer for it, right? And that's the idea as well. Like I think there's an expectation, or sometimes I've realized talking to people that it's hard. You know, you walk through a museum and you see so many paintings that eventually it becomes kind of like it's another drawing. But there's not a single painting in any museum that didn't come from a place of like somebody trying to express something, right?
Right.
And I think we've sort of, I mean, I don't know, I don't want to generalize, but it feels like sometimes we've lost the connection with the idea that like whatever you're seeing took somebody a long time and effort to do, and a lot of suffering. And this idea as well as like Goya's paintings, like the black paintings, didn't come from a place of joy. You know, they're quite brutal, and the interesting aspect as well is that nobody knew why he painted them. He didn't leave anything on writing. Like most of those paintings were unknown for 100 years after he died. Nobody knew about them. So this idea that like he didn't do it for fun, he didn't do it for beauty, he didn't do it to sell them. He made them because he was processing something. And so that's sort of what we're trying to say, and that is that these paintings came from a very internal place, and that he had to suffer a lot for us to be able to enjoy those paintings. So just make sure that next time you see a painting like that, you value that there's a human behind it that went through a lot to do them.
1000%. That was beautiful. That was beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
As an artist too, and this is a question for both of you, you are almost like married to his art as you're creating this piece. I want to know like what was like reflected or unveiled to you guys about yourselves throughout this process.
That's cool. Okay, I want to let Raul for a bit.
Okay. So, well, first I have to say that I'm not an artist anymore. I used to be an artist like in the past, but right now I'm just like the business guy, I would say, you know. So my trip during this project, it's been different, you know, because through that I was able to convince the team, my partners, that they loved the movie when we first told them about it. But my thing, it's been more about how to finance the movie. It's been more about how to produce a film, that it's the first time that we do it. I mean, we used to do a lot of animation, but for clients, for commercial work, it's a different monster to do like your own film, you know. So we always wanted to tell our stories. When I met James and he told me about this thing, it was like incredible story with incredible art. It was like all the pieces were awesome, and it's been a tough trip, I'd say. Like trying to convince a lot of people that this needed to happen, and people saying that we were basically crazy doing this kind of story, you know, with this budget, with this quality, just like doing this short film. People didn't understand what we were doing, so it's been kind of like fighting against a lot of people to do it, and at the very end it's here. And it's really,
it's almost like the film is our own black paintings, so to
Yeah.
speak. Like, you know, it took 4 years, the same time that Francisco was at the house doing the paintings, and it was like a constant struggle back and forth, and it ended up being one of those things. Well, again, every act of creation has a price, right? It took us a lot of work to just get it made, and it took a lot of, you know, frustrations and moments of thinking that it was never going to get made, and a lot of promises and a lot of expectations and all these things that we had to sort of constantly remind ourselves that we're doing this for the right reasons. This movie is worth it. And it was that was really the hardest thing. I think you said something that I think is interesting, which is, and I hadn't quite, you know, it had been in my mind, but not quite formalized that way, which is from now on, whenever people talk about, like, you know, our careers, they'll talk about Goya too, which is it's a bit of a strange feeling, because we grow up because Goya is such a brand, so to speak, and I think growing up or becoming in any way related to it feels a bit. It's like, I mean, immediately I reject it. I don't want it, which is too much. But again, I think the more I read about him, I think the main thing is that the brand of Goya, I guess this could be generalized to almost anything, right? Like you humanize, or because people have such historical relevance, we can put them in not necessarily a pedestal, but we sort of we think that we know them, but as you start researching it, you understand that Goya wasn't any more special than anyone else. You know, he was just, and that's this. Going back to the film about this, I think there's a reason why in the film the name of Goya is never mentioned, and it is because because the house doesn't know, but mainly it's because we want to make sure that you empathize with the person behind the myth, so to speak. I know it sounds a bit grandiose, but it's that idea that the story that this film is about Francisco more than it is about Goya, if that makes any sense. Because I believe that beyond all of that branding, everything we know about him, he was just a man, 75, dealing with dementia, being deaf. He was a widow. He was dealing with so much loss and so much death and so much of a very convulsive time that he was just there alone, suffering. And I hope that the whole point is that you empathize with just a poor man being alone, you know. And I think that it's taking away any social graces that him being Goya gives him. It's just another person. And I think that's the element where you're mentioning about the connecting with him in any way is just that. Is that he was just a normal guy.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I didn't even think about it as like him being a brand. He's like the original brand maker from the 1800s.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit more about like how you said that you guys want to, or you sometimes want to be separate from like the brand in a way. This style of animation, I'm curious to know what influenced it. And also to follow that, were you presented with like a storyboard when he brought the idea?
Okay. What inspired the look of the film, I think, like Raul has mentioned before, we both we've been working on the industry for 10 plus years, right? Mm-hmm. And we've done commercial stuff for different brands and different type of clients. But there was always, I think, at least in my case, an inkling that there is a lot that could be done with animation that is not being done. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of, and I think as you grow, when you start working in the industry young, at first you are sort of the target audience for the stuff that is being made. Like when The Incredibles came out, I was the target audience for The Incredibles. I loved it. But then as I was growing up, I felt like animation was leaving me behind a little bit because it was producing stuff that I couldn't engage with as much. And so I went to theater and cinema and novels and all these other mediums. And I felt that I think that there's a lot of visual language that I'm taking from all of these other mediums that we can bring into animation in the way that we set the shots and the way that we lead the scenes and the way that we allow the performance to be a little bit more nuanced, for the characters to feel a bit more real instead of trying to be more like animated in the best sense of the word. But it's just wanting to feel like we're watching a movie that belongs to, like, visually, for example, I was originally at the very beginning very inspired with, like, I know this sounds a little bit douchey, but I can't help it, but like German expressionism, like Nosferatu and Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, that's the type of movies that felt like the black and white was very pictorial. It was never meant to be realistic lighting. It was always meant to be very theatrical. Mm-hmm. And I think that was something that we wanted to do with this film, to make sure that we use lighting as a narrative tool. And then, of course, using Goya's own work and his paintings and the way that he treated the light and the way that he treated the compositions to make sure that we could distill some of that information and some of the stuff that he was doing into our shots and our film was very important for us. And then, I go for it. What about the storyboard?
Yeah, well, I think that when I first met James, you already have like, but not the whole thing. No. But you already have like few storyboards.
I had a scene, and I think I had I have a few like big paintings.
Yeah. So that was the thing. He had an incredible pitch. I mean, if you listen to that and you see the paintings, you will also say, I want this project. I want to be part of it, you know? So that's what I first saw. So maybe 7 or 8 different paintings, an initial version of the script also, and yeah, just him telling you about this story with all that passion. It was like, wow. I mean, we want to be part of it again, and also I do agree. I mean, we've been working in the animation industry for 14 years already.
Wow.
And we also think that there's a lot to do yet. You know, there we always wanted to do like adult animation and high quality animation, and when we started, the only possibility was to do like video game cinematics. There weren't like no products in the market like doing like high quality adult animation, you know. Now you can see more and more with Arcane, with Love, Death and Robots. We work, for example, in Secret Level, and there are more and more products like that. But when James told me that he wanted to do like horror in animation, it was like, this is what we need to do, you know. And I'd love to see more horror animation in the market, you know. I think that there's a lot of place for it. And about the style, we like to treat each project like a unique one, you know. So we like to explore and give each project like their own style. But it's true that James had like so clear the way he wanted this to look. Just more or less like the Goya's painting, but moving, you know, and that was a challenge. So we had to do like a lot of technical development to be able to do something like the final film we did, you know. So,
Yeah.
but it's been a great trip, you know.
I actually have another question about animation and AI.
Okay.
How do we feel about that?
So I think that we are currently living like the best marketing in the history with this AI thing. You know, I mean, even my grandparents are talking about AI and they don't even know what's that, you know, but everybody's talking about it. And I'm sure that is going to be a game changer. Um, but there's a lot of work to do there in order to actually regulate what's happening. You know, they're basically stealing a lot of properties from everybody to be able to do like generative AI.
Yeah.
So for us in the studio, we are not using at all generative, but we like to like try to do some mechanical process in an with machine learning. You know, that's okay for me. Having a person like just doing clicks like a robot, it's losing an actual human being, you know. So it's great that you have the opportunity to do specific things with machine learning, but I'm not so much into this generative thing. I think that in the future, maybe, and I don't know, again, this is my personal opinion, we'll have like both things happening. We'll have products that have been made completely with AI and products that have been like done by humans, and that is going to have more value. That is what I think, or what I would love to see, you know, like maybe just shows that they want to do like a lot of episodes. I don't know, maybe for kids, things
Right.
like that. You can do it with AI, and it's fine. But I'm sure that the audience will love to see like craftsmanship, right? Like
1000%.
No, I'm gonna try to not get too riled up or too like
Yeah.
on the weeds of it. I think I'm on two minds with this whole thing. I think on one end, when I was studying in animation, we were taught like on paper with cameras like the old-fashioned way, and I remember all my teachers being like, you know, demonizing all these new digital softwares that were appearing for animation, like Photoshop, After Effects, all these things, and they were going to destroy the industry, and they were going to take everybody's jobs, and it's going to be cheaper to make animation, and da da da. And the reality is that years later, 10 years later, it's kind of the opposite. There's more animation being done than ever because it's more affordable. The quality, general quality of animation is been through the roof over the past 10 years. And I do believe that, like, I try to not be catastrophic with when technology enters the industry. I feel like normally it tends to sort of, there's a bit of a movement inevitably, the same way when 3D came into the industry. But I think, again, I choose not to get too scared around it because I've seen it before, and I'm pretty sure that it's not gonna necessarily destroy the industry. I think that's been too catastrophic, and it's more of like a marketing play, as Raul was saying. On the other end, I'm a little bit tired of suits and people in the tech world telling us that what the art that we do has no value. I find that I'm starting to get tired. I'm starting to get a little bit impatient with having to be quiet around it, and it's starting to feel quite, it's just offensive. And again, because it's one of those things that even when we were studying animation 10 years ago, all my relatives or friends of my parents that didn't know anything about art, and they were just into, they were lawyers and doctors, and nothing wrong with those jobs, but they were already telling us that we were making a stupid decision making animation because they didn't quite understand it. And this feels like the next evolution of the same stuff. It's the same type of people that don't understand culture telling us how we should make culture. And it's just starting to feel very tiring. And I do agree it's going to be a game changer, and it's going to change the way we do animation. It's going to change the way we consume it. I don't quite believe that it's going to change the way people relate to stuff, because I feel that if you think long enough, whether it's subjective or very clearly on people's minds, anything that you connect to, like any song that you like, any handbag that you like, any piece of theater, any photograph, any comic book, any video game, at the other end of that thing that you like, there's another person, and you liking the stuff that the other person has made is kind of you connecting with the humanity of somebody else, and whether you know it consciously or unconsciously, like, it's there. And I feel like, most people, when they see something that they love, the first question they ask is like, who did this? Who made this, right? Because it is the person that made it that gives that thing value. The thing itself doesn't have any value, and there's such an obsession about the final product, and such a crass, or it's so crass when people, like, they tell us that it's gonna make it easier to make art or make anything that we make, and I get a little bit offended because I'm like, you don't quite understand that actually I don't care about the final product as much as I care about engaging on the creative act. So every artist, when they finish a painting or a song, the next thing they do is do another one because they want to keep doing it. It's not, we never celebrate the final product as much as they think. And I think there's an over obsession of, like, trying to clean up the messiness, but it is the messiness in which we want to exist and in which culture exists. So I leave it at that. I think
Okay.
this gets a little bit too
Yeah. No, it was good. We got a good business answer. And you weeded in a little bit of the business.
Yeah, and I'm not completely against it. Like, I get it. Like he was saying, like, organize us into things, and like some of the things that are, like, so annoying of the processes, because, like, these softwares they're very cumbersome, and they're not quite constructed to be creatively friendly. So the more we can do to, like, iron out all of that stuff, great, amazing. But do not tell me that AI is going to be able to come up with a script or with a plot for a movie or anything like that better than that person, because that gets me a little bit riled up.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the person for sure.
If you were to leave one piece of advice for people who aren't on a similar path as you, but they're in the middle gray area where they're not having that motivation from the beginning, but they're not really seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, what would it be?
Every time I see people that are trying to figure out if they can do it, I think it's more people dealing with the fact that they know they want to do it, but they're now trying to convince themselves that they shouldn't. I think follow that first spark that told you that you should be able to do something, or that you wanted to do something, and just, like, go all the way. And the struggle will be there. But I'm pretty sure that if you're kind and you surround yourself with people that, like, understand what you want to make, and you do it from a place of, like, not necessarily looking for anything other than expressing yourself and, like, finding, like I was saying before with the whole AI thing, like, you want to connect with other people through your work, you'll be okay. And then another little advice I think that I see a lot is like especially when people are young and they want to do animation or they want to do, almost anything artistic, is like to have as varied a pool of influences as possible, like to not be only consuming the one thing that you love, because I think that can end up in this very sort of repetitive, like regurgitating the same thing over and over again, and it creates things that have less of an identity. And I think the more you consume, theater, novels, comic books, dance, any other form of art, I think it enriches your work. And I think that's normally a very easy way to make sure that whatever you do has a bit more of a unique identity.
Yeah, I would say just keep going, and go for it, and work hard and forget about everything else. I mean, whatever you want to do, it's not just about animation. Maybe you want to be a cook. I don't know. Whatever you want to do. I think that if you push hard and you work hard, and you finally get it. So if you're in the middle of a process like this, when you were asking, I was going to say, leave it. That's stop it there. But that's what people usually say, right? I mean, I've had during this process a lot of people just saying, why are you doing this? And it's hard to listen something like that. Or for example, when I started the company, I remember a guy, I'm not going to say the name for sure, but a big guy from the industry who asked me a few questions about the studio, and after my answers, he told me, just kill it. And it was like, why? And it was hard to get that kind of feedback.
Yeah.
But at the very end, you just have to forget about it and fight for it. And you'll get it,
Yeah.
If you want to do it, you will be able to do it.
Oh my God. Well, thank you both so
Thank you.
much. Yeah, this has
you.
been great.
Really?
All right. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Thank you.